Welcome to American Building. I'm your host, Atif Kader. Join me as we explore the skylines and strip malls, the crosswalks and rail crossings, the balconies, the buildings, and the boroughs shaping the next generation of real estate. Let's build common ground. One thing I wanted to lean in on was you mentioned that your travels around the country were part of that influence, and that brought you to San Francisco for checking out the Transamerica Tower. Is one of the guests on the podcast, Vishan Chakrabarty from the Practice for Architecture and Urbanism. His dad was also a chemist. He came from India, and with the budget that they had, they did road trips all across the country. And for him, those trips, whether it was the East Coast, the West Coast, or Europe, or the Soviet Union, those were all the influences that led him to want to pursue a career in the built environment. So you're going to send me that sketch, and I'm going to include that in the show notes because I know our listeners are going to want to see that. So we talked about the challenges, the history, we talked about the inspiration, we talked about the financing. So now lay out your development strategy in terms of what you addressed initially and what you address later, and how you prioritize the spending of I believe you spent how much money on the renovation?
Around $250 million so far. It's a $400 million budget, including building 3 Transamerica, which is a new building.
Sure. So lay out the development strategy overall, what you're spending money on and when.
So we've completed basically everything but developing 3 Transamerica. Mm-hmm. Right? It was a 3-year remastering that included different parts. I'll just walk you in very technical because you're an architect also, so right. So you'll appreciate this. So first thing, as I said, the ground plane, we have a park and we have buildings around the park. And that's how it was. It was the park in the middle and 3 buildings around. The first thing that what I wanted to do is make sure that it's not 3 buildings around the park, it's 3 buildings inside a park. Mm-hmm. So we expanded. First thing we planted. We planted trees around the property, so now the park surrounds the building, not only in the center. And Foster found the original landscape design done in 1972, and we completed the missing holes of that design. So that was the ground plan was a major undertaking. What we also did is we changed the facade on the ground floor. At the time, William Pereira is a brilliant architect, but he made a bunch of mistakes, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to shoot him down by any case. His design was a brilliant building, but his interior skills were not as good as his architectural skills. And you'd walk into the building and you have like a 9-foot ceiling. But meanwhile, there was 17 feet ceiling available there. So Foster blew up everything. They exposed the structure. So today, when you walk in the building, that grid of that amazing kind of grid of concrete goes from the outside to the inside to the ceiling, and it all looks as one. When you walk in there, you would be 100% certain that that's the way it was built in 1972. You wouldn't think that we did this, now. So it's very interesting to see kind of how we change the ground planes, make it so inviting. Okay, make it so inviting for people to come in there. And that was really about opening the space, creating light, creating an experience for people that because, like I said, I want people to come in. It used to be a very standoffish building. I used to say it looks like a building from the Russian, Cold War time.
A lot of concrete, brutalist.
Yeah, but today it's full of green, full of glass, full of light. And so the entire ground plane between that, the restaurants that we built there, the lawn, all the public spaces, the stage for performances. It's really a happening place. It's a place for people to congregate. It's a place for people to be together. That's at the ground plane. On the upper floors, we've elevated all the infrastructure of the building. Like I said, it operates like a brand new 2025 building, from the technology to face recognition to the elevators to security. Everything is brand new. We amenitize the building like a hotel. We have a full floor of wellness, probably the most spectacular gym that you'll ever see in an office building, overlooking Coit Tower and the Golden Gate Bridge. We have a full floor of conferencing where Norman Foster designed, conference rooms that, again, with ceilings that were personally designed by Norman Foster, which are all sculptural. We have our private bar on the 48th floor at the top, which is only for building tenants. The most spectacular bar you'll ever see. It's at the top of the Transamerica Pyramid. All this is for tenants. So the idea was everything on the ground plane we give back to the public. Everything from 2 and up is exclusive for tenants. That's how we separated kind of that fine line between what's private and what's public.
So the experience of lightening up and opening up the tower has a lot to do with the strategy of what you're removing. For example, the lower ceilings from the property, but also has a lot to do with the finishes that you chose. So as a tenant's walking through the entrance doors of the building, through the security and up to their floor, talk about the finishes and the look and the feel that you wanted that tenant to have and the materials that you chose in that process.
So I think it was really important for us that the building feels like everything that you see there feels like it was built like that in 1972. I did not want it to look like we took an old building and we modernized it, and now here's all this contemporary furniture and contemporary materials. It needed to feel and look of its era, because that's the beauty of it. And this is where Norman Foster is a genius. These light woods, furniture that was, designed in the late 60s and early 70s. It kind of all works, right? It all works together. And very much taking into consideration, because of the amount of light, how light bounces from the inside to the outside. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent obsessing over, 30 different types of stone with 1% more grain, 0.5% less grain, in order to get it perfect. And I had to look at it in the morning, at night, in the afternoon, like from different angles. It's an obsession. But that's what we do. And I have this obsession at every project we do, because that's the attention to detail. And it's something that, again, I appreciate the question because you live that world, you understand that. But the idea, the result I want is not for people to say, oh, wow, he picked the right materials, no. The idea is the result is what I want people to take away, which is noticing nothing. Meaning you walked in there and it just feels like it's always been like that and it's perfect. That's great design. Not, oh, wow, he did a beautiful ceiling or he put stuff. No. That to me it means that to now point these things, or people have to look at that. It's not natural. The idea was to create a natural experience, something that feels like it's been there, and we did not intervene with the uniqueness of this building. That's probably, and as I'm sure you'd appreciate, a lot more difficult than just to come and do something brand new and contemporary that just looks great.
Totally. And I think in particular, when you look across your portfolio of projects, there's many of them that are historic and iconic properties that require that attention to detail. And specifically with the Transamerica Tower, the outside of the building is crushed quartz. So there's already a stone element. So I would imagine that choosing something correct for the interior requires coordination. And I appreciate
100%.
yeah, there's a lot of steps to the process. Depending on the light, it can look completely different. Is that correct?
100%. And the building looks different. And depending on the time of day. What's amazing about the building, and you appreciate it, the windows are massive. For a building in 1970s, these huge windows.
It's about 3,000 windows, I think, in the
yeah, but also they're pinned in the middle. So turn right and left on a pivot so you can clean them. How brilliant is that? Because you know what it is to go try to hang from the building?
dangerous.
So there's some. But think about it, it's 1972. Today, okay, we can think about everything. This building was built in 1972. The only other place that I'm amazed by stuff like that when I go to Disney World, that was also built in the same era. And Walt Disney was a genius. I mean, he thought about things that were so ahead of its time. And you think, who would have thought about these things at that time, and that they still are relevant today, even though they renovated and they done work, it still feels like it was always there.
Yeah, I think that idea of permanence of design and being able to allow or designing in such a way that the experience is the primary thing and the actual elements of it can melt in the background is such an important part of being a successful developer. And that's something that I learned when I started my career at Raphael Vignoli's firm as an architect. That's where I interned first. So
Yes.
definitely can appreciate that. Okay, so we talked about you.
Beppo was a very, very close friend of mine. We used to
Oh,
go
he
out and
was.
get all together a lot. We spent a lot of time together. I mean, it's a guy that I miss very, very dearly.
I could imagine
Um,
the
yeah.
there is probably very amazing conversations that you had given his background as a pianist, and then an architect, and your interest in fashion, and then your turn into.
Well, and I play piano also. So
Well, you did.
I'm not Raphael Vignoli, but yes, you know.
Amazing. I think that I definitely can appreciate how important the relationship is between architects and developers. And you worked with him on a project, correct?
Yes, I did. I did. I worked on a project with him at 125 Greenwich. I ended up being bought out I sold my interest in my partners at the time. Um, but yes, I worked with him on the design of that project. It was a lot of fun.
So a big part of any type of project, whether it's a Transamerica Pyramid or other historic or iconic properties, is the entitlements. So entitlements are often a major contributor to schedule delays and in turn costs for real estate projects. And as we mentioned earlier, the approvals process was slow and involved protests, including Dianne Feinstein, former senator, in controversies when the Transamerica Pyramid was first built in the 1969 to 1972 period. So that was obviously way before you acquired the property, but you were familiar with that opposition when you purchased it. So as you were developing your strategy and getting the approvals for it, talk to us about your experience in the entitlements process.
So it's interesting, when I came to San Francisco, as I said, we didn't really know um um everybody there. We've hired kind of the best lawyers, the best lobbyists, the best consultant. And Norman and I wanted to do certain things like changing the facade of the pyramid at the ground floor, like building a very specific building at 3 Transamerica. And I remember sitting with Norman at a meeting, and we're told by all these consultants, no, you'll never get this approved. You're going to waste 6 months, 8 months, a year, and you're going. It's you're wasting your time. So I asked why, and they explained to us why. And I look at Norman. Norman looks at me and said, "Guys, you know what? I hear you. I respect you, but this is what we're submitting." And they're looking at me like, "But you don't understand. It doesn't work like this in San Francisco." I said, "I got it. I don't know how San Francisco works, but logic and good design works everywhere." No, it doesn't. Okay. Long story short, we submit these papers, and then there's a time to do a presentation to the planning committee. Norman flies himself for a few hours
Mm-hmm.
just to do the presentation because he's so vested in this project. Not only that they approve the project, they put it on a fast track on the entitlement. And it's funny because again, everybody thought we're never getting approved these things, but the reality is, and I've heard a lot about this in San Francisco. People ask me, "Isn't it difficult to get things approved and all these issues there?" I said, "No, San Francisco for me was they the city couldn't have been greater. The mayor couldn't have been greater. The current mayor is amazing. He's a dear friend, and somebody that I think is doing a phenomenal job also in San Francisco. So again, it tells you that if you do the right thing with the right intentions, um, entitlement is something that, again, same thing with the Raleigh, by the way, in Miami. We changed the zoning for the entire Miami Beach strip there that started this whole area called Billionaires Beach, which we transformed that whole neighborhood also. Again, I was told it could never be done. Yes, it took time, but the reality is that Billionaires Beach today is the center of Miami Beach. So, like I said, when you have a vision that's not in the box of what everybody thinks it should be, okay, you always have people that are naysayers. It's no different, as I said, that there were protests against the building. Okay, there were people that told me we can't get this done or that done, but thank God we got it done. And of course, today everybody said it was the best decision. So I think that like I said, you don't need to be distracted by the noise. right? You need to do what you believe in, and if you have the conviction and you know what you're doing is right, go ahead, do it, move on, and things will fall into place. At least that's my experience.
So, Michael, you mentioned the current mayor of San Francisco. That is Dan Lurie, who took over for London Breed, and he's credited
Correct.
for the transformation, a step by step of San Francisco. And In particular, you talked about the approvals process, and many of our listeners are familiar from previous episodes about the expression "not in my backyard," so NIMBY, as a big challenge for developers to actually get projects across the finish line. I'm a city planning commissioner in Hoboken, and I can definitely imagine a much larger version of that is the experience that probably existed for a very long time in San Francisco of saying no many times before actually saying yes. So you mentioned Norman Foster coming in, flying in for the presentation. Talk to us about a few of the characteristics of how you approach those interactions that you think allowed you to be successful for the entitlements for the renovation of the pyramid, as well as the new construction property you mentioned, which is 3 Transamerica.
So look, I think it's really important to bring both the community and the planning board into the process.
Okay.
And not just say this is what we want to do, right? Have them feel like they're part of the process. Have them feel like they are they're 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 part of the decision process, part of the ideation. Um, and like I said, I think that if you have the right people on the planning board, right? If you have the right people on the planning board, fantastic. Then um, then even if things don't fall in the box, good design and good reasoning prevails. Now, sometimes you're dealing with planning boards that just, are naysayers. It doesn't matter what you will do. But I can tell you that even in this such situation, I remember with the Raleigh, different project was a major undertaking. We had, we won, we ended up getting everything approved by the planning boards. But one person was very much against us. And I remember his closing statement, he said, while I cannot vote for this project because of this guy thought there should be zero development ever and everything should just look old and fall apart. But Michael Shvo deserves a medal for the restoration work he's doing at the Raleigh and for Miami Beach, even though I don't support the project. So even the naysayers at some point cancel when you do the right thing, when you restore the building, when you're a purist, like I'm a purist, I believe the building should be restored to the way they were designed, right? Unless there's some bad design. But that's what the Raleigh were restoring to the original design of L. Marie Dixon in the 1940s, the Art Deco design. If you do that, you're going to get the support of even the naysayers because they have nothing to say. Now, they might not support you at the end with a vote, but if you do the right thing, and again, you cooperate with the neighbors, you cooperate with the community, which is something that we always do, you will have the support.
Yeah, and I think the what that really brings to light is the way that we started the conversation about being able to match tenants to their properties, the financing providers to the financing opportunities, the projects you're working on. In this case, bringing people together around that common ground sounds like a very similar idea. Um, so, tell me what's currently going on with the property. Is lease up complete? Are there still available parts of the building?
So lease up, we've done tremendous amount of lease up. Part of the business plan was was in essence to replace some of the tenants because the rents have doubled and tripled in the building, and some of the profile of the tenants were not, the profile of the tenants that could sustain those rents or would be part of the new Transamerica Pyramid, right? There was a building that was old and with a very specific aesthetic and very specific rents. Today, the rents, as I said, are 2 to 3 times what they were before COVID when we bought the building. So we will continue having role in the building for probably another 18 months. We
Okay.
signed a massive lease with Morgan Lewis for their headquarters. They moved from One Market to our building. We've signed multiple leases, as I said, almost at $300 a foot, and leasing is moving very quickly. With deals that we have in the pipeline, I think we're just under 90% leased, but some inventory will come back as I said, when old leases are expiring and we're going to replace those tenants. Part of what we do is we do a turnkey solution. So we will provide you a fully fitted Norman Foster office if that's what you want. If you want, you could build it yourself also. But the idea is to create a service, leasing as a service, not leasing just as a commodity.
And for the lease-up process going forward for that next 18 months, are you handling that internally with Shvo, or do you have a third party that's taking care of that?
No, we use JLL. We have our own team on the ground, obviously, but we use JLL as a third party as well.
Excellent. So we'll include the link to that in the show notes for anyone that might be interested in finding out more. So that brings us to the end of our interview. So I'll be making a donation to that amazing nonprofit that Michael mentioned, Pyramid Dreams, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes as well. So I encourage listeners to take a look at that organization. And I appreciate your time today, Michael. And so thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. You brought me a lot of good memories.
I'm Atif Kader, and thanks for joining me on American Building. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app and leave a rating and review. America's housing crisis is one of our greatest challenges, but what are the real solutions? Hear from the developers and other industry experts driving meaningful change. Get our exclusive guide, Housing in America, 8 Ways We Can Solve Our Way Out of a Crisis, at AmericanBuildingPodcast.com.